I really liked playing sports, and I played a lot of different ones. So I really enjoyed that. It was how I learned to relate to people, was through being on a team with them and working towards a shared goal.
I started actually playing on a team in like 5th grade, and I don't know, I think I just loved the team aspect of volleyball. Like, you have to play as a team, you have to play as a unit.
Sports have always been, essentially a home for me. It's always been a place where I have felt the most supported, and just part of something.
Sometimes I feel like I really don't know myself outside of lacrosse. I don't know what I'm going to do in my future. Sometimes I really just don't know where I'm going to go, when it's just my focus is lacrosse all the time.
Once I kind of moved along in my career with field hockey, it was more so well, they don't need me anymore. Now what do I do? I don't feel like my team needs me.
I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I think I might need to quit. But then I was like, that's not an option. My team needs me.
You have to put on a brave face because your team's relying on you.
You kind of think that that's how you're going to get love, is being really talented and excelling in athletics.
Nobody ever even said the word mental health.
Suicide and suicidal ideation, those were things that I thought about a lot.
I mean, obviously we know suicide among student athletes is not just limited to Division I, but notoriously the last few years, that's where we've kind of seen it the most, between Katie Myers. There was a lacrosse player at Binghamton.
Binghamton University community is mourning the loss of one of its own.
Robert Martin was a grad student and a member of BU's men's lacrosse team,
who was on track to graduate in the spring, died by suicide on April 1st.
Robert was a military brat. Robert was born in Connecticut. He went to 9 different schools by the time he graduated from high school up in Syracuse. When we moved to Washington State, and he was in 4th grade, and he came home with a stick, and I was like, what is that?
Peggy was there, being the primary parent in Florida. Her mother was ill in North Dakota, where they're from. And it was just getting to be, kind of a hard situation. There was a couple kids from Florida that were looking for some summer league stuff, that were willing to travel. So they ended up on this team together doing some summer tournaments.
And she's like, hey, Robert's not having a great situation in Florida. His mom's really needs to get home to North Dakota. Do you have a place you could bring him? Because he really wants to play goalie somewhere where he can get recruited for college. So that's what brought it all together.
After his junior year, he came home for the summer. And I asked him if he wanted to go back, and his answer was, yeah, why wouldn't I? I said, okay. I was like, because you want to stay home with your family? When he got there, he was welcomed by the Eccles and the boys that were already on the team. They weren't the best team, honestly, but he really wanted to play there.
Sounds like he found a family up in Syracuse.
He did. Yeah, and I honestly think of all the places that we lived, that was probably his favorite.
He wanted to play Division I lacrosse.
That was his goal.
That was his goal. That was such a big goal for him. It was huge. And he's just like, hey, I'm going to this Binghamton prospect camp. They didn't know him and just impressed him enough that they said, okay, we want you to be part of our program. And that really made his life.
He'd play, and then he wouldn't play, and then he'd play, and then you think he was disappointed that he wasn't getting enough playing time. For him, it didn't go the way he thought it was going to go, and that was, I honestly think, one of the things that sent him down into a spiral. In his mind, he felt like a failure. He felt that he was letting people down, which wasn't true, and nobody thought that. That last night I saw him, he had attempted the night before, but nobody knew. I didn't know. How would I know? It was cold. He was covered from head to toe. You know, when you say, I miss you already, and then you read the note that he sent. And nobody knew that I was walking around all day. And I tried to kill myself last night, but I got to talk to my mom one more time. It makes you wonder how somebody could feel that low about themselves when all those things are not true. There was not one thing that he was thinking that was true. He wasn't a failure. He wasn't a burden.
He had this anxiety that he didn't really talk about to anyone. And I think you just saw him as being quiet and confident. And on the inside, he had this anxiety that I don't know how bad it was then, but I know later on he told me he could not control it. And that's the part that, you know, really led to his death by suicide.
I kind of see suicide as a control thing. And people don't often feel when they decide to, you know, go that route, they don't feel like they're in control. And this is the one thing that they can control.
He took it to heart. You're the last line of defense, right? If you miss a goal or you lose a game in overtime or whatever, I have a picture of him and they lost in the playoffs his freshman year of high school, and it's just him sitting on the field all by himself.
Growing up, I definitely had a lot more difficulty with that. Whenever I let the ball in, I would be like, it's my fault, it's all my fault. It was really difficult. It still is difficult.
I felt like there was always eyes on me. There was so much pressure on me to perform. The team will always like put me as like, Taryn will win. So like she's already 10 points. And I think I was carrying a lot.
You play that sport for so long and you feel like you are nothing without that sport. And then something happens within your sport and it's like, I don't know what to do because the sport's who I am.
So this is where that community and that social support is so big. I'll use this example, right? People have boxes in their lives, right? Where you have different things that contribute to you as the overall person. The things I think about are you have school, you have family, you have friends, and you have athletics, right? So that's 4 things. So now all of a sudden we're taking away 25% of their life. That's a pretty big chunk of life, right? That's a pretty big chunk. We're probably taking even more than that because a lot of their friends are also athletes, right? So now we're taking 50% of a person's, how does this person feel all right about that, right? If I take away 50% of your life and your identity, that's gonna have a big impact.
Being an athlete is not your only identity. Like as much as I love sport, like there's so much to life out in sport and out of sport than being the strongest player on the team and being the fastest player, having the most stats, scoring the most goals.
You've worked your whole life to get to that point. And then you sort of have a moment where you take a step back and you're like, what am I doing this for? You know?
It wasn't just being a part of a team and having teammates and your teammates being your best friends. Like, I think now that I know this, I've been able to appreciate my own individual journey a little bit more.
You know, we really need to be holistic in how we're approaching sports, and really caring for the full person.
And so I think really emphasizing like who people are holistically is incredibly important.
You are more than your sport. You are more important than being a goalie. It doesn't matter. You are more important than that. Your sport does not define you. What impact you're going to make is way beyond your college sports career.
And so I think you have to rely on the people around you. You have to rely on your coaches. You have to rely on your teammates. You have to rely on, you know, the little kid that you were playing for that started all those years ago.
Whenever a ball goes in, I have one defender who always comes up to me and she's like, you got the next one. You can do this. Like, we're going to have your back. And I'm like, okay, like she puts me back into my, you know, my game.
Oftentimes, the people who make the decisions in sports are often the people who need the most education.
If there's a way for all coaches to be able to receive like basic mental health, like first aid, for them to be able to learn like in general, like what does anxiety look like? What does depression look like? Just education in general of more just like signs and symptoms. Also like how to appropriately respond when you have an athlete open up.
Coaches need to have training in assessments of mental health. So they're able to like refer their athletes that they think have different signs of depression or anxiety or just like would benefit from a professional therapist, that they can make those referrals and intervene early on.
We need to sort of figure out a new way to do it, and sort of active participation from coaches.
Because I think that would go to show then that the athletes like have permission to go to the coach about that, or it even start more conversations from like athlete to athlete if the coach is starting that conversation first.
When coaches or staff on like that are working with athletes really engage with them on like other things that are going on in their life, like asking about their families, asking about classes, asking about their weekend, and not just always keeping that relationship like just like your worth to me is how well you perform.
Allowing people to have breaks. Sometimes I'm not in the headspace to go to practice, and honestly like supporting that, like that's okay. You don't have to be ready to go to practice every day. Some days you just need a break, a mental break, so then you feel better to come to practice 100%. Just supporting athletes in those little moments that they might need just some more extra time to themselves.
It's a balancing act, because to be competitive, you have to push a little bit. You have to be able to push in and, oh, I'm not feeling it today, and maybe that's physically, maybe that's mentally, and it is just that delicate balance, though, of what's the right amount of push, what's the wrong amount of push.
I'm looking for an outlet to be able to like educate and to be able to just like touch other people and to like share my story to see if it would relate with anybody. And I'm excited to continue to grow it, and have just been dreaming about like maybe one day starting a nonprofit through it.
A lot of it is stories and community and, you know, just sort of normalizing that idea that you are an athlete. That is not the only thing that you are. And so I think the more that we sort of talk about it, and the more people who have succeeded in doing that share their stories and how they did it, and, you know, what they sort of went through to get there, then, you know, the more and more that idea that you have to be an athlete and that is the only thing that you are becomes reduced. There is always someone that wants to help you, and there's always someone that wants you here, even though it might not seem like it. There's always someone there. You just have to ask.
You've got to have a red button process that you hit if you see a kid that you think is in crisis, and then you deal with them. So, because however much effort it takes, it's worth it to keep from looking at a perfectly healthy kid laying in his casket.
15 for Life Foundation was created less than a year and a half ago, and today we partner with them in honor of Binghamton men's lacrosse student athlete Robert Martin. Today's game isn't about winning or losing. It's about the honor to challenge and face each other in the medicine game that this is lacrosse. Please join us in a 15-second moment of silence to honor our own Binghamton Bearcat, Robert Martin, and all those impacted by suicide.